Hi, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. We have returning guest, good brother, Mr. Larry Ballard, joining us again for yet another segment of the Global Reset Wealth Transfer Talk for God's Giving People. This is part two from last month, and we'll be diving into a new subset of topics and questions to get his knowledge base on a variety of discussions. If you're new to the podcast, please do like, subscribe, and share. Helps the channel grow and others to gain the knowledge that you're currently being afforded. As you know, Larry is a Christian. He has been in the faith for quite a while, and he has a book here that I'm going to be bringing up for you on LarryBallard.com. You can check him out, Liberty Crusade, Restoring the Republic, which we talk a lot about with fellow friend and patriot Sandy Marecki. Larry is in my estimation, a historian buff and well-heeled on a variety of subject matters. And he's also one of the few people that I've come across in this wealth transfer movement who I believe, there's many people, but in this particular focus that complements what we attempt to do from a faith and calming perspective, he has a very mature and measured outlook on things from the Lord's perspective, very knitted, healed, and submitted. And those are the kinds of people that we love to have on the most. And Larry has been a very important anchor to come alongside us at this critical time as we face the end of the first quarter, going into the actual new year, which we'll discuss in part in April of the year of 2026 that most of you already know is the real new year, with Easter coming up, the resurrection of Christ, which gave us all the hope that we still have to this day. And so I'm honored to have back on Mr. Larry Ballard. How are you doing today, good brother?
I'm doing good.
It's good to have you back. So,
Thank you.
no, thank you, brother. Go ahead. You're going to say?
Oh, yeah. I do want to add something before we get into this.
Sure.
You were kind enough to give me an idea of the questions you were going to ask. So I just went in last night and I pulled a smattering of slides from half a dozen presentations that related, generally speaking, to the topic you're talking about. And then what I did so that we don't get bogged down in this, I kind of highlighted them on my end. So you may see them, you may not see them, I'm not sure, but here's what I'm going at with these slides that I pulled. Basically, when we see a pattern and that pattern repeats and repeats and repeats, then I'm not a prophet, but then it's pretty easy to say, hey, all the pieces mesh together. And so what we're going to be talking about here is how the pieces to the reset, how the pieces to everything that we're waiting for are coming together, have been coming together for actually years, and now are accelerating and happening very fast now that Trump is back. And we're moving to some very significant times. We're moving to some religious points of times that are going to trigger certain events. We've got a war going on that's going to be pivotal in what's happening. You've got the reset looming in the background. So as John asked me the questions, I'll try to knit those pieces together. And what I'm trying to show you is we have a God who knows the end before the beginning. And if we can just have the faith to look and say, I see these pieces, and if all these pieces line up, then the next set of pieces are going to line up, and the next faith, and the next set. And so what we hopefully end up with is an understanding that God's got us, that he had it all planned, and that no matter how it looks, he has chosen America as his chosen nation along with Israel. And we're going to come out of this, and the outcome is going to be absolutely phenomenal. So my message is, don't fear. I don't care what happens. I don't care what you see. Don't fear. God's got it. And hopefully when we mesh the pieces together, you'll feel comfortable about that. So back to you, John.
Well said, and sets the table well. And that's one of the things I like about you, Larry, is you, like me, our team, like to do puzzle pieces from a part research, part history, part faith, part prophetic, and visionary. And I think all those components are necessary, as you alluded to, for a time such as this. So let's get started with the first piece, which is somebody we both respect posthumously, the late great Kim Clement, who I think we could argue is and was the most accurate modern day prophet of our time, because even in his wake, all these years later, a lot of his prophecies that came to pass are still coming to pass. And I believe that's what First Thessalonians talks about in chapter 5 is test the prophets to see if it comes to pass in verse 20 of chapter 5. And we're seeing that in full spectrum. So let's go back in your history annals, if you will, to this particular video. This is sort of a staple for Kim. So I want to go to this. Let me know when you can see this.
I do.
Okay, great. So this is a prophecy he did that was well healed back on July 18th of 2015. nearly 11 years ago. 11, significant number biblically, right? And he's talking
Mhm.
about the dinar and what's happening right now with Iran. We see President Trump with Ramadan and Eid coming up this week ending. We know it's quite significant. They don't typically do anything during their holy days, but that's now
Right.
coming to an end. So we know this thing is scripted. That being said, Kim talked about a moment we're going to play in a second here of taking the hand of America off the hand of Iran, because you see Trump saying we're going to end our part, and watching to see what Israel, the state of Israel, does last with respect to removing the last factions of Iran's corrupt proxy, both off Iran and Iraq, and the Bashar power plants accordingly. So let's play this clip, and I'd like to get your reaction.
Okay.
There shall be a break in the financial system in the Middle East, the dinar, and many shall say, why? Why now? But God said, when things seem at their worst, I shall bring it forth and I shall free them up. There shall be a prosperity in a place where you least expect it. The prayers of my people in Iran and the prayers of my Christian people that come forth from Iraq and from Palestine, yes, Palestine, and even those regions, I will hear their prayers and I will do something marvelous and will affect this nation, says the Lord. You put your hand in the hand of Iran, I say to you, I will remove the hand of America out of the hand of Iran, says the Lord, and I will free up my people, for their promise is yes and amen. Yes and amen.
Now, Larry, you had the opportunity, that well-heeled prophecy. You actually met Kim in person, had direct dealings with him. How significant would you say his prophecy was in your dealings with him back then, and what's coming to pass and we see in the natural now?
Well, I think it's what you said. I was, just for your audience who doesn't know, the religious background that I have, I wouldn't let me go to seminary school, but he brought me an unbelievable blind prophet who sought me out and said that God sent her to me to tutor me. For 6 years I sat under her. So I am an absolute believer in prophecy. And it's just exactly like you said. We have a myriad of prophets that are out now. There are more prophets on the scene today than I've ever seen in my entire life. But I don't think there's one of them that compares to Kim Clement. His accuracy rate is unbelievable. And if we look at what you just said, if we type two keywords together, I think it says it. He's saying basically that he's going to remove the hand of Iran off of the United States. And I would add, off of the world, right? And that's going to usher in peace and prosperity. And then the second thing that he said was he was talking about the dinar, which is talking about the financial reset, which is talking about Nesara. And as we look at this, the events that I put together, I see sequences. And what I see is, as we're going to have those things happen, we have to have peace. You can't have economic revival in the world, and you can't have political turnover that's stable and that's beneficial to mankind unless you have peace and unless you have prosperity. And Donald Trump, I'll just go to what he's doing that I think is confirmation of what Kim said. So what's he doing? He's ending wars. He's ended 8 wars. And what's he done right now currently that we should be looking at? He's basically bombing Iran, but he's doing more than that. He's gone into Venezuela, and he's going into Cuba, and he's dealing with Greenland, and he's dealing with Canada, and he's dealing with Mexico, and he's dealing with our hemisphere, and he's basically putting a squeeze. What is the most significant thing you can think of that would end wars? Economic total collapse. So what's he doing? He's putting oil pressure with the oil that he got from Iran and the things that he's done, and it's affecting who? Russia. It's affecting China. It's affecting Japan. It's affecting India. It's affecting Iran. It's affecting all the major nations of the world. And whether he's going to bomb the power plant, I don't know. But even if he doesn't, I think the oil could be the trigger that brings this thing to a peace. Now, me personally, here's what I've been praying for. God hasn't told me, but the people of Iran, I want to put it in a perspective. They are not bad people, by and large. There are those that have been radicalized, those that hate us, those that want to kill us. But if you look at what's happening in Iran, the people went out from under Sharia law. And when they do, guess what? Most people don't know there's one of the largest Christian revivals happening in Iran that's happening anywhere in the world. So I believe that he's going to free us, but at the same time, he's going to free the people of Iran. So what I don't want to see is I don't want to see the power plants bombed personally, because then I think it brings hardship on the people of Iran. I'm praying that this can be done through overwhelming force and be done through economic pressure. But either way, it's going to happen, and it's going to happen very quick. So let's go on down. If that answers your question, let's go on down.
It does. I just want to get your perspective. Like I said, being well healed in this, and having had met Kim in person, gives you a unique vantage point to add to the tenor of the discussion. We're personally,
he's humble.
Absolutely, and I agree with you. We would like to see the least amount of collateral damage, casualties, hardship for the country. At the same time, we believe that the reset, the key to it, a lot of people think it's the HCL stuff. They don't realize that's already queued up behind the scenes. And when they do an emergency government, they can do it like that, because, the dinar is going to be cut off, the remainder of dinars, the oil squeeze you alluded to in a moment ago. I really think those Bashar power plants need to be taken down, at least the illusion thereof, to some degree. Israel is going to have to be the one to do it, because we won't. Either that or Saudi Arabia. And it will, as you said earlier, no matter how things look, parallel that against what Kim said, when things seem at their worst. We as Christians are supposed to go by spiritual eyes, not physical eyes. And I think that's where we run into some trouble and problematic issues in this movement, is a lot of people are looking at how things appear to be, rather than what's actually going on behind the scenes. So I think that's an important, demarcation.
Well, what I'm praying for is just knowing Trump, and knowing that if Trump says something, he says, you crossed a red line. It's not like other presidents. He means you crossed a red line. So I'm hoping and praying that just the overwhelming force that he's brought to bear. Japan's now entering into this, for example. He's made a hornet's nest of all of the Middle East nations, and they're now absolutely against them. So I just hope and pray that he sees that Iran sees an overwhelming response. And if we have to go after those power plants, I'm praying that we can somehow or other have enough precision that we can do a limited strike so they can get the power plants back up again within a period of time. But I think just the threat of it could be enough with everything else that's going on. But one way or the other, here's what I know. Kim Clement's prophecy was right. It's what God showed me all along. And that is that we're going to have peace and prosperity on this planet. And we're going to have all of the forces that control us are going to lose their money, lose their power, lose their governments. The banks are going to fail. The corporations are going to fail. The politicians are going to be removed. And we're going to have a complete, and we'll get into this later on when you ask some other questions, a complete change in what the geopolitical and economic system of the entire world looks like. And it's going to be spelled with peace and prosperity.
Well said and agreed. So let's move to the next point, which is, we talked about this in the beginning of the segment, Ramadan and Eid coming to an end. Ramadan this Thursday, the 19th. And then, of course, Eid al-Fitr on the 20th, which is just an addendum holiday. I think that kind of wraps up their new year, if you like, much like we do here in a different sort of way. Coming up this Thursday and Friday, where they typically don't do things business-wise. And so I think my suspicion is President Trump is taking that into account for the optics of timing everything out. So I'll get your take on that in a moment. But you thoughtfully, as you said, put some slides together. So I want to go to one of the slides that you thoughtfully put together and just play the first couple of minutes of this elongated video.
Okay.
And then regarding Ramadan, and then we can get your take on that. So let's take a listen.
Okay.
Italy didn't wait to collapse. While France burned, Sweden fragmented, and Belgium surrendered its suburbs, Italy watched. And then it acted. No more veils in public. No more foreign money building radical mosques. No more excuses for forced marriages and cultural enclaves that defy Italian law. Because Italy saw what other nations refused to admit, that multiculturalism without integration becomes a slow-motion suicide. Now, Italy is drawing a line in the sand, not against Islam, but against the collapse of national unity. And what's most shocking? They might be the first Western country to actually prevent it. Let's break down exactly what Italy did, how far it went, and why this may be Europe's last warning. April 2022. Sweden's prime minister stands before cameras with a confession that shocks the nation. Magdalena Andersson admitted that the Scandinavian country has failed. Segregation has been allowed to go so far that we now have parallel societies. We live in the same country, but in completely different realities. 2 decades, 20 years of watching communities form that answer to different laws, different values, different loyalties. Sweden's foreign-born population had doubled in 20 years. 1 in 5 Swedes now born outside the country, and by the time leaders admitted the truth, over 100 police officers had been injured in riots triggered by a single Quran burning. Gang violence had turned Swedish cities into war zones, bombings, shootings, entire neighborhoods where emergency services required armed police escorts, areas where Swedish law meant nothing and clan justice meant everything. The damage was done. France had an even bloodier reckoning. In October 2020, a teacher named Samuel Paty showed cartoons of Muhammad in a classroom discussion about free speech. Days later, he was beheaded on a Paris street by an 18-year-old who'd been radicalized through social media and mosque networks.
Okay, so let's get out of this. So what are your thoughts on that video, Ramadan, and what you see a lot of these European nations doing? You know, France has optically discussed going to war as well, as Trump is trying to implore other nations to join him in the shutdown.
Mm-hmm. A little caveat before we get into this.
Sure.
When I had a near-death experience, the first 2 assignments God gave me was to read the Bible cover to cover and then read the Quran cover to cover, which I did. So I have a unique perspective on this because I'm probably one of the few people that is a Christian who's actually not only read his own Bible, but read the Quran. So what I did when we talked about this is I went in and I pulled what they call a Sharia, which is like our verse, a Shura, and it relates specifically to Ramadan. So it's Shura 9:5, and here's what it says. But when the sacred months are past, or in the sacred month, we could say Ramadan, have passed away, kill the infidels. That's anybody who's not a Muslim, who's not Islamic, wherever you may find them, and kill them and besiege them and lay in wait for them in every place of observation. Now, if you don't think that they mean that, then I want to read you something from history. This is coming from a book, The Islam Religion of Peace or War. And if you read the Quran, you'll read verses that, oh my gosh, it's just like the Bible. It's peaceful, but you got to understand the history. What Muhammad did, he was the sole writer of the Quran, where we have how many different people that wrote about the Bible, how many prophets that wrote prophecies that came true. And so what he was trying to do was to minimize the significance of Jesus Christ and make himself the newest, latest, greatest prophet. And the Christians rejected him. And so what happened after that is he then had no choice. He wasn't going to win the Jewish people over. He wasn't going to win the Christian people over. So it had to become a religion of conquest. So we have had a 1,400-year war going on back and forth between Islam and between Christianity, and we're still in it. And they are absolutely radical. They believe in the 12th Imam. They believe in jihad. They believe in bringing the world to the brink of absolute destruction with an atomic bomb. So on the one hand, we have to have this war to keep them from ever getting a bomb, because they will use it. But then as we go later into our discussion, I'm going to tell you why that's just the visible scab. I'm going to tell you that by having this war, we've hit the hornet's nest, and we need to know a little bit about what's happening in Europe. So what I want to tell you, I want to read you this out of this slide here, and then I'll comment real quickly on this. Since the beginning of Islam's conquest, they have killed, 51 million Christians. You ready? 80 million Hindus, 10 million Buddhists, and 120 to 125 million Africans through their slave trade. Now, I just ask you a quick question. Does that define a nation of peace? Does that define a religion of peace? Or does that say we are willing to do anything? We're non-discriminatory. We want to rule the world, and anybody who doesn't side with us is done. So now let me tell you something else. You've probably got some people out there who at least know about this, but they don't know the history. Remember in Hitler's day when the Jews had to wear a yellow star? That was to denote that they were Jews. Well, where did that come from? It came from Islam. And basically, if you were a nation that was conquered under Islam, here's what happened. You have three choices. Convert. Okay, great. You're now one of them. No problem. Okay, don't convert, and then you have to pay a fee, a tax. You have to basically submit to Islam, and you either have to wear a necklace or you have to wear the yellow star. And if you walk down the street and you see an Islamic person coming, you have to cross to the other side. But you exist within modified slavery. If you don't accept either one of those two, off comes your head. That's not a nation of peace. That's a nation of tyranny. And the people in Iran want to get out from under that. The women don't want to wear a burqa. They want to be able to move freely. They want to be able to have jobs. And so what I see happening is what God is doing is not only bringing Iran down, but I look around the world, and I'm going to go a little bit beyond the question that you asked. And I look to Russia, and I look at the terrible plight that Russia's people are in. And I look at China, and I look at the millions of people that are out protesting, and I look at Iran. And what I think God has done, it relates to one of the prophecies that Kim Clement said. In regards to America, he put a veil over our eyes. He did it so that in that period of time, in that period of frustration and fear and not knowing what was going on, we would open our eyes and we would stand together as one nation. But what I think God is doing with all of those events that hinge, most importantly, around what's happening in Iran, he is bringing the people to their knees. He is showing us no matter what happens politically, he's the one who is ordaining everything, and he's going to bring the world together. Because what I see is when people come out of depression, out of being repressed, like in all those nations that I just mentioned, it's amazing, but Christianity blossoms like you can't believe. And there's a huge Christian movement happening within China and happening within Iran, and Russia is already significantly Christian. So basically, he's setting the captives free. We have been brought to our knees, those of us who've paid attention, and now he's going to free us. And so I forgot the rest of your question. So in terms of Ramadan, I think that what we've got going on right now is they're going to try to do something. And that takes us to, I'd like to hold it for later, that takes us to what I think is going to happen in the United States. And what you were seeing in Europe is they create a war. They did the Arab Spring. They brought the immigrants in, the refugees in, and then they let them do just exactly what God didn't want with America. All the people came from Europe because they constantly fought, because they bickered over religion and so forth. And he brought them to America where we could assimilate together in a uniquely Christian, uniquely American fashion. And we had peace and prosperity, and we were called what? The United States of America. That's what's happening within Europe. They're now waking up and understanding that they let these people come in and they let them adopt this policy. I don't care what nation in Europe you're from, you are not to have your allegiance to that nation. You are to have your allegiance only to Islam. And that means you've got two nations, and any nation divided cannot stand. God tells us only a nation united. So what I believe is God is going to bring us through this, and he's going to open the eyes of all the people. We've had to be softened and brought to our knees. And when that happens, the peace and prosperity that we're looking for is going to happen, and the financial reset is going to be on its heels. So,
yep, appreciate that.
That's
Thank you,
kind of
Larry.
it. Have I answered your question?
Yes, you did, as
Okay.
always. Appreciate that. I just want to take this opportunity before we go forward, because I know you had some internet issues there coming in and out, which is fine. It's just, we're going through all these glitches with what we perceive or what we are watching to see about, the EBS coming in. I think these are telltale signs of it and not just one-offs, but I just wanted to take this off of you a little bit. I know some people had commented, my team let me know about some noise in the background. That was not you. That was not your end. That's on me. I had a frequency running in the background that I forgot to turn the volume on. So mea culpa, I apologize. But we've taken that into consideration going forward to alleviate that, so that you don't need to adjust your microphone, or if you're at work and hearing this, it was not on your end. So hopefully that helps some people out. The next thing I want to talk to you about, Larry, in our notes here is, I know you don't have a slide for this one. We'll go to the ones that you do, but just briefly talk about the power plant a little bit. You said that, you hope it doesn't happen, but if it does happen, and I think there's a high degree of probability Israel or Saudi Arabia will, how long do you think that will last before they kind of say, okay, everything's fine? Like a week? What are you anticipating with that?
Well, you know what? God never does anything unless there's a foreshadow, right? Well, I think there's a foreshadow right now. It's spelled Cuba. Basically, he's cut Cuba off from oil, and every indication I see is that they're now having blackouts. Their revenue stream has been shut because they basically had a fairly substantial tourist trade. And when you don't have oil, you can't bring the planes in because they can't refuel. You can't run the hotels, and you have rolling blackouts. And now they're probably close to near blackouts. So a society cannot function in this day and age without technology. Most of the people in the world have lost the skills that our forefathers had. And when you have a blackout and you have no power, everybody is going to want it. And what's that going to do? It's going to make the people of Iran stand up, and it's going to make them come in and do just what Donald Trump has been hoping for. It's going to make them, allow them to come in and to take power and to bring the regime down. And then I don't know what will happen in terms of the Kurds, but there's a possibility that they might get involved. So I just go to the end. God always knows the end before the beginning. And the end is that Iran's days are over. They're going to fall. Christianity is going to blossom. And whether they have to take that power plant out or not, I honestly don't know. But I think that if they do, I give it 2 weeks before the whole nation is up in absolute arms and they bring it down. I hope that answers your question, John.
Does indeed. Thank you, Larry. Let's go to your slides here a little bit. You're going to have to help me and navigate through what you want me to show. This is in regards to the currency reset with slides. Can you tell me which slide that is, please?
All right, let me get over here to where I can scroll down slides individually. Before you do that, there is a slide up here that I want to comment on because it relates to how significant the issue is with Iran. And that is that we have to now do some of the things that Europe is doing. They're passing legislation. That's slide 11, if you want to bring that particular slide up. And then I'll go to what you were saying. So basically in Europe, they're now saying we're going to close our borders, just what Trump did, right? And we're going to pass legislation, and here's what it's going to do. You remember in that clip that we played, there you go up, the one up above. There you go. Stay there for a second. Remember that where they chopped that man's heads off for showing a cartoon of Muhammad? Mm-hmm. Well, that's happening. That boy had been in that country almost all of his life, and he'd been radicalized in the mosque. So here's what I want to tell you. I showed you those beautiful mosques. Remember, now these people came as refugees. They didn't have anything. Where did they get the money to build dozens and dozens and dozens of multi-million-dollar beautiful mosques? It came from the Arab-rich nations. It came from Saudi Arabia. It came from Erdogan in Turkey. And what's the string that's attached to that? They pay for the imam's salary. They build the mosque. They write the curriculum for the imam. They write the curriculum for the schools. And what was the essence of the curriculum? That you hate. You absolutely refuse to assimilate into the culture of the nations here. For we have to do the same thing. And what I do a lot of times is I say, I don't care what's politically correct. I'm going to tell you what I think has to happen to make this thing work. And here's the simplest piece. There's much more to this, but this is what we can do tomorrow in America to fix this problem and to start to fix it. We can simply pass a single law that says we're not going to have to monitor their money. We're going to see no Sharia law in this country, and we'll monitor the money that's coming into the mosque. And just like Italy has said, anybody that they find is laundering money and has an agenda that is against the best interests of Italy, they'll shut them down. We need to do that. And what the Supreme Court's doing over here on the other side, we need to do. Omar, we need to get rid of her and everybody like her. And it's simple. The Supreme Court can step in and say anybody who has dual citizenship, you cannot serve two masters, and therefore you cannot be in office in this country. So I hope that didn't take you too far off. Now, rephrase your question because I got so carried away, I forgot it.
No, that's fine, because that's the next slide down here that we can talk about. So this is regarding the currency reset and what you think are the conditions we need.
All right, here's what I say. I'm a person who I don't care what they tell me cannot be done. I don't care what they tell me is politically correct. I just look at what common sense tells me and what the Lord is orchestrating. So from the vantage point of Vietnam and the vantage point of the dinar in Iraq. This is a situation that requires all the nations of the world to say, yes, we concur that your economies are stable. And to have them be stable, there are certain simple things that have to happen. And then after that, you're looking at the political situation to find out how soon they're going to happen. So both of these economies meet each one of these requirements. They have a stable, growing, financially solvent economy. They have reserve assets. They have a stable government. The only issue is the question mark about when the current conflict is going to end. And we're talking about doing some things that end it very soon, probably within the next 2 to 4 weeks. And they have natural resources aplenty. They have adequate infrastructure. You can't have a strong economy unless you have the infrastructure to get the raw materials to market, to manufacture them. They have both domestic and international trade agreements. They have manufacturing capability. They have international trade agreements. They have domestic markets and international markets. They have an undervalued currency, which has benefited them because it means it makes their products less expensive in international markets. And you cannot, some of the nations of the world fail this last one. They do not have food and water stability. Both Vietnam and Iraq have all of these things. So what that means is they're primed, they're pumped, they're set. There should be no reason in the world that the international community should not say there's no reason to not allow you to revalue your currency. So I see it as poised and ready to go, and already having been processed and already having been approved, and just waiting for the moment that we see that the events that are in Iraq are brought to bay, and basically that brings us to a situation where stability exists and where the reset can happen. And therefore, my conclusion, looking at this not as a prophet, because I'm not, but looking at it, trusting God and knowing that he doesn't give me the details, but he's told me we win. He's told me, just like Ken Clement said, that Iraq is going to basically be taken down, and the obstacles that they have presented to the world are going to be removed. And so that to net it down, there's nothing except ending this war that is going to end the reset that we're all waiting for.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I agree with you on the time frame as well. I think we're locking into the target of the bullseye at this point. Next up, you'll have to help me with this slide where it is regarding the Save America Act and the Clarity Act we're waiting on to get passed. If you can show me that slide.
Put a slide in on those. I just wanted to talk about them.
Yeah, where would that?
So basically, what you've got, this is on housing, because that was one of the things you said you wanted to discuss.
Yeah,
You can just stay on housing. There's no slides on the Clarity Act. So I'll just talk about what I think I see. Basically, you have to have regulatory clarity. So we've got a situation right now in my mind. I believe XRP really was founded, I think it was 2013. I think it's been out for years. And we're in a position where hundreds of entities have adopted it. And it's ready to go, just like the currency is ready to reset. It's ready to go. There's nothing technically that holds it back. Matter of fact, we're at a point where I think I can safely say this. If some genius were to come out tomorrow and said, you know what, that XRP is pretty good, and that whole idea of what they want to do with the new banking system makes sense, to go to a system that's not based on fiat currency, but it's based on tangible commodities that cannot be controlled and manipulated, that prevent financial collapses to happen and boom bust cycles to happen, and stabilize the economy, can be transferred in a few seconds at a fraction of the cost. But we've got something better, ostensibly better. The world would say, too late, you missed the boat. We are so committed to XRP, so committed to this process, so committed to the software and the implementation of this globally, that it doesn't make any difference what other technologies would come out. We're committed, and this is going to happen, period, without the shadow of a doubt. Matter of fact, like I said, I'm not a prophet, but when I pray, and I pray ardently, if I give it enough time and trust God, he comes. And 3 years ago, I was praying. I said, I need seed in the ground, Father. And he came to me in two parts. And he said, go find out what crypto is. I didn't even know what it was 3 years ago. Then after I did that and did what he told me to do, he came to me with a very short message. He said, I'm going to give you an opportunity to invest in what is going to become the world's reserve currency. No private citizen has ever had the ability to do that. And what I believe is happening, that we're staged for, is for XRP to ostensibly be the rails of the economic system, which is another way of saying it is going to be very, very, very valuable, and it's going to transmit millions, trillions, billions, quadrillions of dollars. And with that, the value of it is going to go up, and it will ostensibly be what I would call the world's reserve currency. And so I've invested everything I had into it, and I believe emphatically in it. And I believe, just like everything we're seeing, all the puzzle pieces are coming together. And I believe that we're going to have the financial reset that we've been talking about, and it's going to trigger Nesara, and it's going to, and XRP is an integral part of that. So going back to your actual question about the legislation, here's the thing. You're not going to get the people with the billions and trillions of dollars to invest until they know there's regulatory clarity. So the only thing we're waiting for is for these two pieces of legislation to be birthed. And when they're birthed, that's the last thing, the thumb that's removed from the dike, and everything goes forward, because now institutional money can come in. So we've got, a proportion of the general public who God has shown, and we've been investing, but we don't have enough money to move the needle. So once we get regulatory clarity, I think it's almost going to be instantaneously that we see the BlackRocks and the other institutions come in. We see the ETFs get passed. I've seen some stuff that says that they're estimating that within a 24-hour period after those election the legislation is passed, the ETFs open up. 2 or 3 day period, there'll be $2 or $3 billion come in, and it's just going to go from there. So I hope that answers your question, John.
It does. Thank you for that. You said the thing I was hoping you would touch in or key in on. I also agree that XRP will be the world's global reserve currency by 2030, if not sooner. We're seeing a global wealth shift. We talked about that based on a digital wealth transfer. Because a lot of people, they're looking for the grand slam. They're looking for the currency reset. They're looking for the cryptos, looking for the metals, and that's all fine. But let's not negate the singles and doubles and the occasional triples that God does. If he gives you an apartment to a house, if he gives you a job promotion, if he gives you a raise, if he gives you, bonus, somebody donates money to you, that is in essence a wealth transfer, because it's giving you something you didn't previously have, right? And this is all sort of under the umbrella of digital banking. So last two questions for you to respect you and the audience's time. We now see simultaneously, while Iran is optically ending, because I think behind the scenes been done, right? Scripted, but
John, let me interrupt. I don't know if you know it, but your picture is gone. There we go. You're back.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. We're having some cloud cover today, and that effectuates the internet. My apologies.
I was so intent on telling you that I said I missed your question, but I want to intercede before you go, because I want to talk about another aspect of the wealth transfer before we go to the next question. So basically, it's not just Nesara. Let me put this in perspective. Donald Trump has said from the podium several times he's going to orchestrate peace. What else did he say? He said that he is going to use the tariffs to generate wealth for the nation. He said that that's going to trigger us going from what? From the Internal Revenue Service to the External Revenue Service. So let's break that down as another form of wealth transfer that we can look for that's not technically called Nesara. What that means is you're not going to have any federal income tax. What else does it mean? It means that was because it was illegal. And what else was illegal? Property tax was illegal. So you're not going to have any property tax. And what else did the Bible tell us? The Bible tells us, and also our state legislations told us, that we are not to have biblically usury. And basically what they did is they went around and they went to 6 states that did not have a usury law, and they passed usury, and therefore you get your credit card debt that's 30% or whatever. And what did Trump say? He's going to pass a moratorium where, a lot of these things they say for a time, but it comes out forever, where interest rates are not going to be above 10%. So let's add that together. You got 25, 35% more money in your pocket because you don't pay income tax, depending on the state you live in and the value of your house. When I lived in Chicago before I got divorced and had a 4,000 square foot house and a golf course, I paid $12,000 a year. So you're looking at several $1,000s there. And then if you've gone out and been forced into some major credit card debt, look at what's happening there. You've got who knows how much, but basically people are living on the brink right now. They can't afford anything and all of that. Before we even look at Nesara, Trump has laid it all out, and you're going to have more money in your pocket. You're going to be better off, and we're going to all feel it financially, and we're going to feel the pressure be removed off of our backs. So I'm sorry
Absolutely.
for taking you down that side
No.
trail.
That's fine. No, and
So
just to add to the catch rate.
repose your question because you cut out and I didn't hear all of your question.
Yeah, that's fine. Let me just add to what you said before I reposition the question again for technical purposes. Add to that capital gains and excise tax. No more excise tax on cards, which is completely bogus. You see it a lot in the Northeast. It's just an artificial tax. Capital gains, which effectuates our foreign currencies, our cryptos, certain bonds, Zim and others. So it has a substantial effect on that for the investments that God's people and the good people of the world have been widely anticipating. Just to add to what you said. The question is we see the Iran regime change ostensibly wrapping up for optics. Behind the scenes has been done for a while, but as part of the script. Simultaneously now, we see the upward push, I'll call it, of the China-Taiwan conflict, right? China wants to try to overtake Taiwan. We know there's the CCP and the Republic. Just like here, there's the corporation and the Constitution, duality purposes, right? But that has major implications for Vietnam and the Dong. Vietnam has already said that they want to back their economy, specifically the Vietnamese Dong, heavily by silver, which we know they have copious amounts, among other things. So you have a case where China wants to try to overtake Taiwan, which has major implications for Vietnam. What do you see with the people of Vietnam being able to break out of communism and simultaneously set their people free from that tyranny in the process of this shift?
Well, I'm going to answer your question in a somewhat unusual way. You opened this with my book coming up, right? Well, God told me that when I had my near death, I'm going to hold you in the cleft of the rock for decades, and I'll bring you out at your picture just went away again. I'll bring you out at the opportune moment when basically everything looks the worst, when it looks like we're at a tipping point. So now here's what I want to say to you. I want to say that if we expand the scope of what we're looking at, we'll see that we walk right into what you're talking about. Right now, Russia's been weakened. So Russia is not entering this war in Iran because they're not in a position to come in and fight a war in Iran with us when they're having enough trouble with Ukraine. And everything you can imagine that could come to bear on China is coming to bear. I mean, basically they have a water problem, they have a food problem, they have a demographic problem, they have a housing problem, they have an economic problem, they're losing their manufacturing. They're weakened. I don't see that they're going to be in a position, this is me personally, this is just analysis, to attack Taiwan, because now we've got some things that have happened. Japan has woken up, and Japan is a very technologically advanced nation. And what if they go over and they attack Taiwan, Japan's not going to sit still. And all the nations that are around there are all allies of the United States. So you got the Philippines, you got Japan. And India is not part of our military umbrella, but they've put seaports all over the Indian Sea because they don't want to be hemmed in by China. So what I see is a weakened China with adversaries all over the region is not currently in a position. That's why they're not coming into this war with Iran. So I think God chooses the timing, makes it perfect. I think that all the people who would come against us overtly are now weakened enough that they can't. So the only option they have is that if they can take the hundreds of thousands of people that they brought into this nation and turned and basically created terror cells, that's the only option they have. So what I see is that, is like I was alluding to before, when these nations have been oppressed and when they get their freedom, communism falls. So what God has showed me a long time ago is the kingdoms of man must fall. So let me dissect it for you. What's that mean? It means communism falls because eventually people are under such suppression that they revolt and that they get their freedom back. When that happens, they're out from under communism. And then capitalism has to fall, because capitalism basically wastes resources, because we're stupid enough that we build products that last very short periods of time. They're planned to become obsolescent. And so we have to go to a new economic system that's based on building products that are designed to last forever. We have to share things and technology with nations, and we have to have what? Global stability. So what did Donald Trump say that relates to this? If we go into Nesara, if we go into all these changes, he said that we have to have economic parity between all nations. And then we chime in with what Eisenhower said: is there any man, any woman, any child that doesn't understand the principal cause of war in the world is lack of economic parity between nations? And so what we're going to see is economic parity is going to rise. And when that arises and we get these nations out from under the suppression, I see we have the exact opposite of what we had in the 60s and 70s, where communism was spreading all over the world. I see communism falling all over the world, in Cuba, in Venezuela, in all of South America. I see Donald Trump coming in and getting rid of the cartels. And I see the people in Asia and in Europe standing up, and they take out their governments. Look at what's happening in France. Look at what's happening in Italy. Look at what's happening around the world. God has this all orchestrated to the absolute finite moment where it looks the worst it's ever looked. But that's the tipping point that switches the scales, and we move into peace and prosperity. And you were talking about taxes, so I want to come back to it. What do they call our tax system? A progressive tax. So let me break this down. I've done whole shows on this, but I can fill it in just a couple of seconds. We have the federal income tax. Well, when we have taxed the people so much into debt, because every dollar printed creates another debt burden in the form of a treasury bond, that even that money that they take from the federal income tax doesn't cover the bill. Well, then they have to create new taxes. And then when those no longer allow us to be able to cover our national debt, then we have to increase those taxes. All of that goes away. The whole progressive tax system is going to go away. And like God shows us everything, always in advance, or as a foreshadow. So we're going to go back to the very thing we had when America was building its infrastructure, when America was building the Transcontinental Railroad, when America was innovating the Industrial Revolution. We ran the entire country on a sales tax. And that's what we're going to do again. So if you stop and think about that, folks, just take Nesara out of the equation for a minute. The financial money in your pocket is going to be so much greater than you had that you're not going to be able to believe it. And then there's going to be something else happening. As we've had this inflation and as we've priced out kids on the housing market, it's not because those houses are worth anymore. It's not because your automobile. When I was a kid, when I graduated from high school, I had a friend who bought a brand new, really fancy car for $3,500. And now what are they? I mean, you can't even get a transmission for $3,500. So what's going to happen is we're going to go back to a commodity-backed system. And when that happens, we're going to go back to the prices that we had from the 1945s when the war ended. I went to 1971 when we went off the gold standard. And so you're going to see the cost of houses drop. A $400,000 house might be $40,000. So there are so many blessings coming to the people that you cannot even begin to imagine. This is the time God ordained. And what's going to happen is we're going to have all the money that we possibly could imagine happening. It's going to come at us in a myriad of different ways. Let me shut up. I think I've answered your question.
You're fine, no problem. Thank you, Larry. Yeah, it's going to ignite things like necessarily like a candle rocket firework, basically in visual. And just to add to what you were saying before we conclude with our last question for today, really 90% of that is artificial to begin with, right? And you reset the gold standard with silver, and that automatically constitutionally negates the corporate agenda. But 90% of that debt, as X22 says, is on the deep state Federal Reserve. So I'm basically going to give them a big invoice and say, you foot the bill. People are not paying that because we only owe a very small portion in comparison to what they have artificially printed us into oblivion, as you said. So the last question for today is, and this is to balance out the discussion piece away from history, away from intel, away from timelines, and kind of complement what you do well here and on your own channel, And it is, you're not a prophet, and neither am I, but that doesn't mean that God doesn't speak to us and others. You don't need to be a prophet for that. You just need to be available and open vessel. You've proven that time and again. So, with that in mind, what has God shown you, Larry, during this season? And what has He shown you for what's coming ahead across the board, whatever you want to share in the foreseeable future?
All right. I think there's two, maybe three topics that I would bring up in terms of that. I have a real heart for all the millennials and the Generation Zs that can't buy a house. That's all going to change. I started to talk about it a minute ago, but I've got a slide pulled up here, and I'm just going to read it to you real quick, and you're going to see it's going to be amazing. You're going to get your house. So here's some legislation. Donald Trump has said he's going to pass a national emergency on housing. Now, the things I'm going to read are my things, not Trump's. I'm not putting words in his mouth, but it's just common sense. So to fix the housing problem and make it so that millennials can buy a house and can afford a standard of living that they don't have right now, here's all we need to do. Ban institutions from buying residential homes. They're gone. They're out of the market. So the rental only just disappeared. And now ban rental only in the in construction communities. So basically they can't build 10,000 houses and say they're all for rent only. A limited number of homes can be for rent, because if you have a rental community, you destroy the continuity of the community. Set strict limits on the percentage of new homes and construction that can be built. Ban lobbyists, because they're the ones that are lobbying to build these rent-only complexes. Constitutional amendments setting term limits, because we have to change our government as we come into this. We have had presidents one after another that have represented the corporation, not we the people, and they have passed laws that have indentured us and have been in the best interest of the corporation only and best interest of the finances of the corporation. So we're going to have some changes. I think there's a multitude of laws that we're going to be able to get out of and pass laws that benefit, in this case, the young people who want to buy a house. And then there's more. This is coming from my 12 years of experience as a real estate agent, then a real estate broker, and then owning my own small brokerage firm. There's no reason in the world why mortgages have to be the way they are. So why are you getting bid out of every house that you go to buy? Because you're buying a debt obligation that lasts you 30 years or maybe a lifetime. Because if you buy that house, they know that you're going to move. The average American moves every 7 years. And then what do? They said every time you move, every time you refinance, your mortgage is going to start over on day one, month one, year one. And that they know that they front loaded the mortgage so that it takes 26 years to pay for half of a 30-year loan, and you're paying half of the loan off in 4 years. So here's what I say. This is simple legislation coming from my experience. We can change the mortgage rules just like that. There's no reason we can't do it. So if you refinance or you buy a new house, you don't need a completely new mortgage. Why? Because if your credit situation hasn't changed, you still have a good job, you still have a credit rating, that house has to be appraised before it can be granted a loan. So basically all we have to do is just take that existing mortgage and roll it forward by maybe adding another $10,000 to it, and bam, we're not dealing with the second mortgage. We fixed it. And then when they pass these situations that cause people to go into default and lose their houses, I want you to know what they do. They come in and they say, all right, we can get the balance on this house on the mortgage is $300,000 on a $500,000 house, and you owe currently $10,000. So what do? They take your house because you owe $10,000. The back taxes are paid now, but when everything is settled, they make themselves whole on the mortgage. They pay themselves back the expenses they had. But do they give that extra $200,000 to you? That was your equity? No, they don't. They don't. You can get it. You can fight it. You can get an attorney and fight it if you know what you're doing. But basically, they steal your home. So we can change that piece of legislation, and we can make it so that we get control instead of the global elite getting control. These are simple laws that can be written on a simple postcard. You don't need a 2,000-page bill. So my heart goes out for these kids, and I want them to understand there are simple things that can be done. The second thing that God put on my heart is something that I think is going to scare people, but it has to happen. I go back almost 2 months, and God started telling me, I want you to do a show. And I kept saying, I don't want to do that, God. I always like to do things that are positive, and this is a little scary. But I had to do it. I did it 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I think I was one of the first ones that came out and said, back here years ago, I've got this memory that just doesn't stop. I took a course in geology, and I understand tectonics, and I understand the volcanoes, and I understand that we have a water problem, and that we have a problem with earthquakes and volcanoes erupting like never before. And it all comes from the fact that basically the ice caps are melting, and that's causing pressure to shift because the planet's on the 23.5 degree tilt. And what that's doing is that is causing the subduction plates to lift up and cause pressure, cause hydraulic pressure from below. And that's how California, for example, happened to have an uplift of 6 feet over a 400-mile stretch. That's why we've got swarms happening in Japan, and we've had a volcano happening in Hawaii, and we're seeing that there's more volcanic eruptions active right now than ever in my entire lifetime, more earthquakes happening, more swarms happening. And so what I think God is going to do, and I know people aren't going to want to hear this, but there's a prophecy about where I live right now from Corey Timbu, who was a prophetess under Billy Graham, who was in the concentration camps. And she said that there would come a time when there would be disturbances on the coast, and where does most of the world's population live? 70% of the whole world's population is on the coast. And so what I'm seeing is that we're going to have earthquakes, and we're going to have volcanoes, and the entire ring of fire is going to pop, 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 pop. And what that's going to do is bring people just exactly what God wants to happen. This is where he intercedes, and we say it wasn't man, it was God. And it's going to cause an exodus from the big cities. We have now technology where you don't have to work in those skyscrapers. You can go work anywhere you want to. You can do just what we're doing, like John and I. We can communicate remotely. And so what I see is happening is a 250-year trend where people moved from the country to the city, became dependent on the corporations, is reversing. People are going to move from the cities to the countries. They're going to become self-sufficient, just like our founders were. We're going to have community back again, and we're going to basically be able to have the time to be able to spend with our family, and we're going to have time to vote to God. And so the whole structure of humanity is going to shift away from the slavery system and the global financial elite into a system where we have peace and prosperity, and where we do just exactly what the Pilgrims did when they came here. They came here to have independence, to be able to own a home, which we're going to own, to be able to have enough money to support, and to be self-reliant, not dependent. So what I see when this happens, the banks are going to fall, the corporations are going to fall, the politicians are going to get changed out, and entrepreneurialism is going to spring up. We're going to have millions and millions of people who are going to open up a restaurant, open up a farm stand, open up whatever, and we're going to become self-sufficient. Kind of like the Mormons, or not the Mormons, the what group am I talking about?
Amish.
The Amish, yes. We're not going to be astringent. We're going to still use technology. Technology is going to be our friend, but we're never going to allow ourselves again to be as dependent on the corporate entities as we are today. So that's where I think all of this ends. God gives us freedom, and God wants us to know that he orchestrated this, that his hand, he's planned everything. And what it's going to do is it's going to cause some hardships for us, but it's going to bring us to our knees, and it's going to give us the opportunity to look ourselves in the eyes and say, we've been controlled and manipulated, and what's going to happen is the truth will set us free. We're going to get the truth about the election frauds. We're going to get the truth about the governments that have controlled us. We're going to get the truth about the tax system. And when all that happens, we're no longer going to be slaves. We're not going to believe what the elite tell us, and we're going to get our freedom back, and we're going to turn into the society that God wants, a society that is committed to Jesus Christ and committed to peace and prosperity. So those are the things that God's been showing me for the last probably 2 months.
Well, thanks, Larry. I really appreciate that. And I echo a lot of your sentiments. I was feverishly taking notes as you were sharing. I want to have some counter thoughts to what you shared. You described, and we talked about this offline in our pre-production meetings. When we first talked about this after our first podcast, Leviticus 25:9-12 comes to mind. The 50-year debt jubilee in the Jewish calendar, people coming back to their land and their clan, family, restoration, which has implications of getting away from the cities, to your point. Kim Clement said, the earth will shake and shake again. So we know that earthquakes are coming to California to atone for a lot of the sin and the misdeeds of this area. Same with New York. That's why you're seeing these rare phenomenons throughout the country, but it's all part of God shaking up what he needs to do to prepare us to get to transition through this bumpy road to the other great side that you described. As we go back to a gold standard and silver standard, that means you said no taxes. We need to have a central bank. We become our own central bank. Therefore, we have no more interest rates. No more mortgages necessary. Black Law Dictionary, 4th edition, describes a mortgage as a debtor's prison, a slave, if you like. You mentioned that. So we're going to forego that. We're going to go back to the days of before the ball deep state set us up in the 60s, dividing us by race and nonsense, because they knew that the people came together, the truth would come out in them, which inevitably will be one income. People will be able to own their homes outright. No more property taxes. What does a lot stand for? Lease on title. So most people don't know when you pay property taxes, that's like what our forefathers spoke against, no taxation without representation, right? It's a double tax. It's completely illegal and unlawful. So you should own your home outright. You should own the property on it outright. Most real estate agents, since you were one, don't even know that you don't have to legally register your property with a state municipality. You don't have to register. There's no law, just like the IRS. A lot of agents left the IRS because they couldn't find a single law that said individuals had to pay taxes. So you can call it a loophole, or you could just call it the hidden truth they didn't want you to know. But in all of this that you described, we don't even need mortgages. We don't need this nonsense. I think when Trump's talking about 50-year mortgages, I don't think that's what he's really talking about. I think what he's talking about, clandestine, is 50 and 100-year, like Judy Shelton talks about, long treasury bonds backed by gold and silver. Bring the power back to the states constitutionally to secede away from the DC corporation. So just complimenting or trying to compliment what you rightly shared earlier with some other things to give people encouragement. And you're right. You know, there's a lot of people, we call it kingdom projects, people call it humanitarian, whatever you call it. It's heartfelt projects that people have in their hearts, like you, to take monies, like Kim Clement said, and help the poor, only the needy, the sick, the hungry, the widows, the orphans, the military. This is his desire. And all of us in some capacity want to be part of that. We want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. And with great God people like you coming together, galvanized, we can get that message across in a much more concentrated fashion. So thank you for that. As we conclude, Larry, today, to save some time, last word for the audience, and where can people find her, please?
Well, LarryBallard.com, and that's my website. You can go there. Can you bring up the picture of the book one last time? That has everything we need right there. LarryBallard.com. You can go to that QR code. If you go there, you can buy the book from there. It'll take you straight to Amazon. If you want to buy merchandise, you can buy merchandise. And I've got my own show, and guess what it's called? It's called Liberty Crusade Official. I put that official on there because I guess I'm growing. I'm big enough that people are copying me. So I put the official on there so you know it's me. So it's Liberty Crusade Official, and it's LarryBallard.com. And I do 3 shows a week on my channel, and then I'm on with people like John and others during the week, just so I get the message out, as many places as I can. So that's it, John. I think we're absolutely right on board with what you said in your wrap up. And let me see, I want to make one more comment on it. So as we think about what you're saying, I want to put it in a little bit of a caveat on it, on icing. I want to put some icing on the cake is what I want to do. So if we think that the money is going to be worthwhile, it's going to be basically a real dollar is worth $1, and we're going to get out from under the taxes. Here's something else that's happening. And this should have gone under things that God's putting on my mind. So I'm going to add this one last point. God is saying that he doesn't want us to be in debt. So if the money becomes valuable, truly valuable, if the tax burdens are lifted, and what God is doing is we're finding out that we've been poisoned in a myriad of ways, and the construction industry that builds our houses with all kinds of products that have outgassing that are harmful to our health, so that the whole construction industry is changing. It's going to technologies that are not going to poison us. It's getting away from stick-built houses. It's coming. There's all kinds of new technologies coming out that are going to be able to allow people, in many instances, if you're in any way handy, you can go to a seminar and you can get a little instruction and you can build your own home and you can build your house for a lot less money. And we can cut out the mortgage companies. And with the money that's going to be coming to us, I think there are millions of people that are going to be able to go out who could not buy a house at all before, with or without a mortgage, who are going to be able to have a house and be able to not and to be debt free. And that's coming. God doesn't want us in debt. And so there's some amazing new technologies. And the one thing that's going to supercharge it all is something else that Trump did when he went in, and in his first term, he got the legislation passed on the Chevron deal that's going to give us 9,515 patents. The most important segment of that is energy. If we can get the free energy technology that exists released, we can have water on demand from the atmosphere, from the river, some water that's in the ocean. We can build houses for next to nothing. It will change everything. It's all on the horizon. It's just like being set on the table right now before us. So my closing comment is, be patient, trust God, and everything that you're praying for is going to be answered. We're going to come out of this and we're going to have such prosperity that it's going to be hard for most people to even imagine. And then we're going to have community and fellowship and spirituality. Religion is going to change, and it's no longer going to be religious dogma. It's going to be what? The infilling of the Holy Spirit. It's going to be direct communion with God. It's not going to be religion handed down by man. It's going to be religion. No, it's spirituality imparted by God. It's going to be amazing.
Agreed. And to your point, Larry, the Bible says that the borrower is the slave to the lender, but we now will invert that through the Lord, and we will forever lend and not borrow, to your point. So thank you for that. We'll leave your links in the description so people can check you out. As always, give you some exposure there, additional exposure, hopefully. And folks, the bottom line here is to become your own central bank. And one of the ways that you can do that is to own foreign currencies and precious metals. Currency shop for dinar, dong, zim, Thai baht, bolivar, of course, Venezuela, eventually at some point Cuba, and many of the other countries. We'll leave that link in the description as well. Larry Ballard, thank you for joining us in the podcast. We really appreciate it. Thank you, good sir, for your godly, cogent prayer and advice. We look forward to having you on again soon, and have a blessed rest of your day.
Before we go, you forgot to ask me a question.
What's that? I think I asked you a few.
You wanted to know what was going to happen with silver prices. Remember?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So do we have a second?
Sure.
Bottom line is, they're suppressing it. They suppressed silver and gold forever so they can have their fiat system. They're suppressing it when the Clarity Act happens, when the Save America Act happens, when everything else falls in place. Here's what it comes down to. We are going to have a technological revolution, the likes of which the world is never seen. That's why energy is so crucial. And as that happens, patents are released, we're going to increase our manufacturing here in the United States many times over. We've got $18 trillion committed to come in and build. And that meant nothing until recently, until Trump did what? Until Trump had that Supreme Court decision that looked like it went against him, but really it meant that he could now codify his tariffs and put 15% on everybody. And so when that happens, all of a sudden, the whole equation changes completely. And now that $18 trillion is real. It's going to allow, $1 billion, it's going to allow us to build those factories. And when that happens, our economy is going to just blossom like you cannot believe. And what do we have to do that? Silver. It is the quintessential metal. So silver will not be able to be repressed. It will not be able to be held down. It will go to a point where it can be mined cost effectively, and its price will go through the absolute roof. Now that may take a little bit of time, but don't shy away from silver because it looks like it's going down. No, it's got one trajectory. Once they get done suppressing it, the trajectory is up to the point where it allows us to open the mines up and increase production, because we absolutely, two things we need most in this world are water and silver. We can't hold that down.
Yep. Real quick before we go, just real fast, Larry, you mentioned it earlier, 2 to 4 weeks. Do you see that as a reasonable time frame for the silver, for the wrap up with the currencies and the Clarity Act and things you talked about?
I think if we can put the Iran war down, which I think we will, and the Clarity Act and that passes, then I see no obstacles that are going to hold anything back. I don't like to give times and dates, but let's just say I
Sure.
think that the floodgates will be open and everything will be able to happen very, very quickly. Now, if I look out and if I assume that the White Hats are in control, that they're behind God, and that God has a plan, and he's got Donald Trump orchestrating the symphony, then I see that the time frame that Donald Trump is working towards is probably the end of April, because he wants to have everything solidified by July the 4th for the 250th year celebration. And so I think that it's going to take some time. So I think me personally, I've been hearing from God by the end of April, pretty much everything should be ready to flip. And that's
Yeah.
not a
No,
that's
not
not a
the,
hard
not the,
timeline. That's just what all of the common sense that I see says. One by one, all of the pieces that have to fall together are coming into alignment. That's going to allow a flip of the switch, just like ding, there it is,
right.
overnight. It happens.
Yeah, not dates and rates so much, just kind of a general time frame of things amalgamating together. That's what I was getting at there.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Larry. Appreciate it. Have a blessed rest of your day. We'll see you soon.